He's a mathematician in Canada, and he's got a blog called Recursivity. There's a link right there to his site. He's read this book too, and he has come right out and said it. You know, they love to call it specified information or specified complexity, but it's not anything that's ever been accepted by the scientific community. They have no definition for it. There's no paper that you can find describing this. There's no description, good description of how to apply it. So what good is it? Charlotte has called it creationist complexity as a better term than specified complexity, because it's a term that tries to imply its conclusion by the name. Somebody else gave it a wonderful name. They call it info-schminfo, which I think is even better. So here we've got this whole gigantic book where they're arguing over and over again that they've got a way to prove that evolution couldn't happen, yet they can't provide us the tools to do it. We need those. And if this is going to have any validity, there has to be a mathematical definition of specified to tell us what it is. They do have analogies, though, and the analogies are pretty good. The analogies make it clear what they're after. And here's one of their classic analogies here. Whenever you hear a creationist talk about specified complexity, you will see them bring up Mount Rushmore, because it is a good example. Everyone's here familiar with Mount Rushmore, right? Not necessarily. Okay, it's a gigantic monument carved into a mountain in North Dakota. If you ever drive across the United States, you know, it takes a couple days, but you could do it. You drive across the United States, you get to North Dakota, and let's imagine that you're Irish and you've never heard of this strange monument, and you're driving along this highway, and boom, you see that view. What would you think? Would you think, oh, well, wind and storm and chance happened to carve a couple of very human-looking faces in that mountain up there. And further, in your long drive, you'd been buying gas, and you'd have to use the American money, and you'd notice that on our dollar bill, that guy on the left is featured rather prominently. That's George Washington, and the picture on the dollar bill is taken from a famous portrait, which happens to be the same portrait that was used for this sculpture. And you look at your dollar bill, and you look at that, and you say, whoa, they're identical. But you wouldn't say, well, again, it must have been a lightning bolt that hit the rocks and split them in just the way to make George Washington's face appear there. No, that would be total nonsense. What you would say instantly is somebody carved a giant monument in that mountain over there. Why would you say that? Yeah?
Because there's no natural mechanism which can produce such lifelike faces on a mountain. No.
If we had trillions of years and chance, you know, all kinds of things would happen, right? But why do we think it's not likely here?
Because we've seen people carve sculptures.
That's one thing. Yeah, we've seen people do this. I would say also that we can do this kind of point-by-point comparison. You know, we can say, looking at our dollar bill and looking at that face of George Washington, would say that the identity is too precise. That it's so unlikely that chance could generate just that one face, let alone four of them, that we'd say there must have been a sculpture. And that's what they mean by specification. There has to be a prior specification. So for instance, the dollar bill in that case represents a prior specification. And you can look at that, and you can look at that one up there, and you can say, well, they were probably derived from a common source. And I think that's fair. That's reasonable. That's true, that you would do that sort of, you would make that kind of argument. That what we're doing is we're looking for patterns, we're comparing patterns, and when the comparisons are close enough, we say, okay, there must have been somebody who did this. There must have been somebody who made that particular sculpture. A guy named Bill Dembski is the guy who pioneered this idea of specified complexity, and he says there he's even got a nice logic diagram so that you can work out whether something is designed or not. And there it is. What he says is you compare these two things, you compare the specification or you compare the objects you see. If you see contingency, that is if it's a necessary function. That, for instance, the Mandelbrot set, that's a product of contingency, because every time you run that formula, you get the same thing coming out. So you wouldn't say necessarily there's intelligent input there. So if there's no contingency, if there is contingency, you say no, it's a necessity. If there isn't contingency, you go on and say, is it complex? Because there are lots of things you could find that are specific, that you wouldn't argue are necessarily produced by intelligence. So for instance, if you're walking along the sidewalk and you look down and you see a coin and it's heads up, you wouldn't say, oh my gosh, it's a miracle. There's no way it could be heads up on the sidewalk. No, there's a 50-50 chance. So that one, we would say, it's just simply chance. That was not intent to put the coin on the ground heads up. But then what you do is you ask, is there a specification? Is there a prior specification? For instance, pulling out the dollar bill and comparing it to that head on Mount Rushmore. And if there's no specification, well, you'd say there was chance. If it's just a random form up there, no, and there's no reason to think it's something special, you'd say chance. But if there is a prior specification, you say, yeah, it's designed. And again, I sort of agree with this. But here's the problem. Where's the specification for these? Okay, there's a nice, squirmy, wet, tentacle-covered squid over there, a pair of squid actually doing something. And if you don't like those, you can always look at the bunny rabbits, which are warm and furry and cute. But look at those things. Where is the blueprint? Where is the specification? Where's that dollar bill from the ancient past, before there were bunny rabbits and squids, that showed these creatures that you could compare to and say, oh yeah, that was specified. You know, if I found a spaceship in Cambrian rocks with a little computer on it, and ran it, and it listed the DNA for a rabbit, or it included photographs of rabbits, and they were 500 million years old, I would say, okay, yes, there is a prior specification, and you can make a good case for the design of modern rabbits. But that's what you need first, is you need the specification. They haven't provided that. So this argument goes right out the window. Just until they do that dirty work and show us some prior specification for life on Earth, this whole argument is dead in the water. One other thing Meyer says, and here's a bit from Meyer again, in his book, he's near the end of his book, he's got this summary where he's making a case for intelligent design. And what he says is he does the same thing again. He gives us these 3 points and says, oh, these lead you ineluctably to the decision that, yes, intelligent design is reasonable. He says, first one is, despite a thorough search, no material causes have been discovered that demonstrate the power to produce large amounts of specified information. Well, forget the specified part because, well, they haven't defined it, they can't say this. So has anything been discovered that can produce large amounts of information? Yes. All kinds of things generate large amounts of information. If you study genetics, you discover that there are things called genetic duplication events that occur all the time, and those represent an increase in Shannon information. It's just simply undeniable, except here's Meyer denying it. He's saying that he's done a thorough search, which surprised me. You know, I read 500 pages, and he didn't seem to talk about any of the common conclusions of modern genetics at all. He's saying that this has never been shown, but it has. So as usual, what they're doing is building this erection of logic on a very shaky, swampy ground that collapses when you poke at it. Then he says, intelligent causes have demonstrated the power to produce large amounts of specified information. And here's another part of their scheme. They always do this. They throw in something that everybody will agree with. And I will agree with this completely. Yes, intelligent causes built Mount Rushmore. There, that's a huge pile of complex information in a mountain right there. So yes, that's true. And therefore his conclusion is intelligent design constitutes the best, most causally adequate explanation for information in the cell. So his logic is deny everything that science tells us, mention one little piece that's true, and then say therefore that one little piece that is true is the totality of the explanation for the origin of life on Earth. Very bad logic, and it's completely wrong. Okay, so let me say a few more things, a few more bits of science here. Are you tired of creationism already? Yeah, you should be. I want to talk about another phenomenon. So, yes, some of you may have seen this comic already. Some of you may have the T-shirt. You can buy this T-shirt. It's a very interesting diagram, and it represents a really cool feature of science. Science can be confirmed. Now, what this is a diagram of the results of a cosmic ray background survey that was predicted